Finally, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here, even though we had a little bit of a technical difficulty starting with today's transmission. So welcome to the Daily Medicine transmission. It is August 4th, 2021. Welcome back to my subscribers and my consistent viewing audience. It's so great to have you here. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. It's also just so wonderful to have you here and to stop by. And as always, whenever you interact with content on any of these platforms, whether it's BitChute, YouTube, Twitch, whatever, whenever you interact with the content, you subscribe to the channel, you like the video, you share the video, you comment on the content, it actually does help independent content creators like myself who are not sponsored, who are aspiring to grow organically, as much as that seems like being, shooting ourselves in the foot right now. It does signal to the AI algorithm to spread this content to a wider audience, to suggest it on people's feeds. And if you find it inspiring, helpful, educational, just helping you stay anchored in reality as much as it's helping me to give these transmissions to stay anchored in what's going on right now. When you interact with the content, it really does actually support what's going on here. So thank you, and let's get right into the transmission. I'm going to take me out of studio mode here. So welcome. It's a message that we don't want to hear because we still think we're in this year, and we are. The Sun and Mercury are still in Leo right now. So we are still in this yang energy. But, when we came into the summer solstice, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, we can't discount the fact that the other half of the world is on its polarity to where we are in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. But when we reached the solstice point, it did signal the beginning of the next cycle, right? It signaled the beginning of the yin phase. And the fact that we experience that solstice point at 0 degrees Cancer really does show us that we are at the beginning of the yin phase, of the contraction phase that leads us all the way up to the next solstice point, which will be in December. And eclipse season right around the corner, isn't it? And so there'll be lots to talk about with that, because that's going to be our first step into when the lunar nodal axis shifts from Gemini, Sagittarius to Taurus and Scorpio. So we're going to get a pretty good indication of what that might feel like when we have our November eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, right? The sun will be in Scorpio. The moon will be in Taurus, even though the nodes will still technically be in Gemini and Sagittarius. It's close enough that it will, in fact, create an eclipse point. So things to talk about later. But for now, taking stock, going inward and taking stock, it's a message that we don't want to hear, but it's absolutely what we need to be doing. This, of course, is being supported by the transits through Virgo right now. Venus, for sure, really heading up the pack, creating the space, right? Cultivating the medium of our growth. Mars right behind her in also Virgo. And when the Sun and Mercury come into Virgo, it's going to be much more of a point of expression, much more of a I would say a filter system through our minds and our conceptualization, right? Our nervous system will be actively engaged in this process of Virgo. So it's important that we bring it to our awareness now. I just posted my day 3 commit of my 21-day commitment to Reiki attunements. I just posted that on social media. So if you can link to the social media in the description box below in this video, and you can follow that process. And I really invite people. It's never too late. It's never too late. And the Lion's Gate, which is 8/8 and is also our Leo new moon, that's also a great time to initiate one of these commitment periods. It takes about 3 weeks to really institute a new routine or habit. And this is what separates the novice from the professional, right? The amateur from the professional. And we all need to, I would say, we all are here to work towards being a professional spiritual being in a human body. So might as well get to pulling in those routines for that process. So, but we are being asked to take stock. We are being asked to go inward, and there is a lot of not only that Virgo energy that's supporting it, and we'll get into the astrology for today, but the Schumann resonance is now spiking again. So I went more into this in the post on social media, so I don't want to go over it again. I'm inviting you to go read that so you can kind of get a sense of how the Schumann, when it amplifies like that, and how we feel. But it is a moment of calmness in some ways, right? Now, many people experience these increases in amplitude of the Schumann resonance, the magnetic field of our planet. The oscillations are moving faster. This amplitude rises, right? And we feel everybody has a different experience of it, but there are very common symptoms that, like I said, that I described in that post. But one of the things I do want to mention as we are going to unpack a lot of the symbolism for today's transmission is that when this happens, it does appear that we are being supported in the process, right? The magnetic field, it may be oscillating faster, right? At higher amplitude, higher frequency, and people have different responses to this. But this is a moment where we are being supported, right? When we can tap into the lattice structure of the planet herself, her own energetic grid, when we can plug into that through our Earth Star chakra, right? By actually physically connecting with the natural world, sitting on the ground, putting our bare feet on the ground, going out into nature, hugging a tree. It's so cliche, but there's a reason that it is. It's a reason that it's a cliche, because there's probably some truth to it. And well, I know that there's truth to it. Why it developed into a hippie cliche is probably one way to hijack it and take the power out of it, I'm sure. But, at the risk of being labeled as such, when we make these connections to the natural rhythm of the planet, it allows us to actually plug in to her process and to her that field increasing. So this is a moment here where we can take that in and allow ourselves to be supported, to let our container stretch a little bit. We've talked about this before, and really going inward and taking stock of what we do have, because the next round of solar activity is on its way. Solar cycle 25 is not slowing. And in fact, I left another post on social media last night about how the current research is showing that it's likely to peak around October 2024. Let me tell you what, that is the last 15 minutes of the degree that Pluto is in Capricorn. Right after that is when Pluto comes into Aquarius at the very end of 2024. And they have amended their scientific, who's they, the official scientific community when it comes to solar weather and studying these things. They have amended it that the peak of solar cycle 25 is going to come at the end of 2024, when it had been drawn out to July of 2025. This is October 2024 is incredibly astrologically significant. It is the end of Pluto's transit through Capricorn. It will move into Aquarius. That is 2024 into 2025 is really where things are going to really change. They're really going to change. Once Pluto moves into Aquarius, it's a whole new world at that point. And so to have the solar cycle be predicted to peak at that point is very significant. So in the meantime, it's important that we are taking these opportunities of flow and getting into the bliss and allowing and receiving, right? Magnetism is a feminine polarity. It is about attraction and repulsion. There's no action involved with magnetism necessarily other than the attraction and repulsion. And remember, this is Venus all the way, attraction, the object of her desire that she either attracts or repels. And so we're in a moment here with this heightened magnetic frequency of the planet where we can attract in, right? That we can receive. We can be kind of in this yin phase right now, and it allows us to go inward because we need to really know where our weak points are. We need to know where we need to shore up our root system, and we need to get down to the roots of some things in order to really clear out once and for all the root causes of our dis-ease, our dysfunction, whatever it is that we are whatever we came here as a soul in order to karmically, what we've karmically came to release and to let go of is, there's that North Node, that Rahu, and Pluto as well. We want to work with Pluto's polarity point in the natal chart in order to evolve as a soul in terms of our transformational capacity. So I know it's not a message that we want to hear, but it is definitely what's transmitting right now. So with that in mind, let's get right into it, shall we? I'm going to bring up the reading. We are going to minimize myself here. There we go. And we got our Hanged Man back at the middle here. Isn't that interesting? And this time it's upright. So there does seem to be at the heart here this acceptance and a maturity that goes along with the Hanged Man that is a necessity for, necessity for accepting our fate. Fate is nothing more than the cause and effect relationship of past circumstances and behaviors, addressing and interacting with the current circumstances to create an effect. That's all fate really is, but it's something that is put into place and unfolds over time. So when we get to the Hanged Man, the 12th house, the isolation and the flipping of perspective that comes along with this is how we move into the next cycle, okay? Our moon is in Gemini. She's going to finish her transit of Gemini today, go void, of course, at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Within 2 hours, we'll move into Cancer. And so we are getting also into this waning moon where we are really clearing up, a lot of debts, a lot of old stuff. And by the time we get to that distilled balsamic moon, right before the new moon, and as the new moon is like coming exact, we are, everything is distilled down into that feeling-based essence. And so we want to be cleared out. We want to clear up old stuff, pay our debts, make sure everything is where it needs to be as the moon is waning in her influence and power, because it gets harder and more difficult to really engage with our subconscious mind, which is in fact the real motivating factor for all of our actions and behaviors and thought processes as well. It's all happening in the subconscious, which is why things like quantum healing hypnosis technique, QHHT, even just standard hypnosis in terms of a therapy or a counseling technique, all of these things, yoga nidra, these are all important modalities in terms of getting into the subconscious realm and doing the work of planting the seeds there. And this is why astrology is such a useful tool, because you can have some awareness about the cycles that are unfolding in your own personal blueprint, right? That comes with the natal chart. And then you're able to identify the areas of life that are going to need extra support, or that are going to challenge you, or where you can activate something or really tune into the geometrical frequency that comes along with those aspects, right? It's all geometric angles. So, but right now it's important to receive, to be still, to flip that perspective, because that's at the heart right now. That's very much at the heart. So let's start with our causal factor. Here's our Knight of Discs. Oddly enough, represents the transit from Leo to Virgo. We got this fire of the night moving into a distinctly earth sign, but action behind it, right? Even though Virgo is earth, it's mutable earth. That suggests malleability, shifting, changing, adapting. It also is ruled by Mercury, which is, representing the light in some ways, the the speed at which we travel along the beam of light. And so even though there is a stasis that is involved, it's really about the discrimination and intuition that happens with Virgo under the surface, under the soil, and the malleability and the adaptability that goes along with it too. So we see here that we as the knight, right? His helmet is flipped back, so there's no, and he's got this stag on his helmet too. Wow. In Hinduism, right, and in the Vedic kind of tradition here, the stag or the deer represents the Brahma, right, the creator source, that the Atman, our spark of our soul, is inextricably linked to, right? So it's this creator essence here that is represented by the stag. Okay, so but that is flipped back. There's no danger. He doesn't have his helmet on, but he does have a shield. It's a solar shield. Look at that. You can see the concentric circles coming out of his shield. He has a weapon, but it's more like a tool for the cultivation of the physical environment. Even the horse is at a very this level, it's not, the horse is not alert, it's not upright, it's not moving, it's relaxed, the head is down, and it's got this like really peaceful and calm look on its face. Okay, so we see us as this representative of Earth and its function as provider, right? There is, again, this, because the providing in Virgo is about the root system being able to provide all of the sustenance to the plant to support the growth of the fruit, okay? So there's an industriousness, a patience, a steady and reliable energy that comes along with the Knight of Discs. Working without asking much. I feel like many of us have been in this place. If we're truly following our path, we are being of service. We are putting forward our best foot forward in some ways to be of service, to be a provider in a very material way, whatever that is. And not asking, just trusting that our work will pay off in the future, right? Just like farming, concentrating on tasks without getting distracted. This is very focused energy, with mind games, not getting distracted by mind games. There's that duality and division aspect, not getting distracted by the game, right? Or these ideas that are really not anchored in the physical reality that we're living in. And that's hard too, because there's so much being presented to us to go down that rabbit hole. So there's more dedicated, or had been more dedicated to making instead of thinking, right? This is about being industrious and reliable and steady and being provider. Success results from our instinct and pragmatism. Again, this is this concept here of the Virgo energy where we are discriminatory, pragmatic, but also using our instinct and intuition. Now, when it's reversed, which it's not, thankfully, there's, can be very intolerant and unable to put any other interests forward outside of what we are doing. But ultimately, this energy is this transition within us from the Leo energy, which is not exactly easy because, the Sun and Mercury are still very much in Leo right now, but we are feeling the transition in a very material way because Venus and Mars as personal planets are representing what we value as Venus, who we love, who we value, our material resources, the material reality that we're sensitive to, and of course Mars, our inner warrior, our inner actor, action hero, right? The spark of life, the potency to be, all of these things. It's, these two aspects in Virgo are paving the way for eventually when the Sun and Mercury come in and we are expressing ourselves very, very vocally and very much through our minds in this way. So we know coming into this moment now that we have been working very diligently and with a very strong fire to underneath. There's the underpinning of this fire to like get something done and do something and cultivate and do the work under the surface. That is what Virgo really does represent. So as we have this causal factor coming into the present moment, here's our Hanged Man. Number 12, there's a couple different connections here. Uranus as a neutralizing factor, right? Uranus triggers transformation because, in fact, it is very swift adjustments that will, in fact, neutralize a charge, for instance. Just like a lightning bolt is, in fact, neutralizing charge in the atmosphere because of a imbalance of charged ions in the atmosphere. Lightning is nothing more than the discharge of the imbalance through the movement of electrons. At least that's what that is what currently the scientific consensus is in terms of electricity and lightning. But I will say that there are new forms of lightning that I'm discovering are also being discovered in terms of like climate science and solar science, stellar physics, that kind of thing, and planetary science. So that's something that I want to explore a little bit more because that's just now coming onto my radar. Also Neptune as a spirit of sacrifice, right? We release ourselves and surrender to this process. And of course, house number 12, because this is in fact the 12th card, the Hangman in the major arcana. So it's a symbol of metamorphosis, of course, through isolation. Right? And the isolation is exhibited by this turning point, right? That we surrender to this process, that we leave our head down towards the bottom. It's very similar to a yoga pose. And I believe too, this might come, I'm sure this is in other movement arts, but I'm the most familiar with yoga as being trained to teach it. That there is, and I can't even tell you the Sanskrit anymore, but you'll know when I see it, where you lock your hands, you interlace your hands behind you, right? And then you release and you bend, right? You flex the trunk at the waist and you are bowing the head to the heart, right? So that's another way to think about this. But it's through the isolation. It's through this turning point in life that requires maturity in order to accept it, in order to accept the moment of quiet. And so this is the turning inward that's at the heart of us today. So it is time for reconsideration or just consideration in general. Forced relaxation that gives opportunity to reflect. And so we have been very busy and diligent and industrious. And now we find ourselves at this moment where we're kind of, if we haven't done it, we're being forced into some sort of shift in perspective in this turning point. It comes from a devotion and it comes from an acceptance of overcoming the ego. Okay, so this is the heart right here, the heart of the matter, the axis point between our energetic spiritual self and the material realm, which is getting more and more and more connected with each passing day. It seems like it's being separated, and it's the separation and the awareness of the duality that gives us the raw material in which to unify and integrate, right? It's just becoming more obvious to us. And every time there's a change in the system, according to chaos theory, there is a bifurcation that's created in chaos theory. So, and that's something that I think is worth exploring even more, and something that I have to educate myself a little bit more before I can start transmitting that information, because I'm not quite, I'm not, a mathematics professor, but I do understand the basics here. So that's something for later. What I'm trying to impart upon is that there's just been so much here. And now we come at this moment right at the heart of the matter, where we're being invited to not only neutralize, but also as a result of the flipping of the script, basically, and forcing us to consider. So we can take a conscious choice, and this is upright, what it really represents. It's a conscious choice. Here again is the disk of the sun. We have the Ankh. We have the snake that is wrapped around. We have the structure of the four. If you remember, the Emperor card, number 4, also has this very same structure with his legs crossed, but this is much more of a sacrifice. You can see very clearly that it is meant. This is also goes back to Norse mythology, many mythological constructs, but in Norse mythology, this also is, Odin, taking this, the same step on the tree of life. And so there's many ways to consider this, okay? So, but this is at the heart here. Now, what's running in the background here that we can really draw our power from, often when this card is reversed, it does signal that we have been putting aside our inner work, that we have allowed mundane things to settle onto us, right? Instead of accessing our spiritual power, right? The sands of time and reality are piling up because we're not doing the work to keep digging down and digging down. So there's a strong tendency here to slip into old patterns, and it's important that we recommit and make greater effort now. And it's surrounded here by number one, the Akashic Library, which we will of course go into, and the camel, letting us know that we do have all the resources and they are within us. Now, you can look at this reversal as well, is that we're digging even deeper into ourselves. The internal work is really very strong, and kind of, again, this yin phase, this is really signaling how important it is, and really drawing our attention to the fact that we really do need to put our focus back onto the inner work. It's so easy to get caught up in the outer narratives, and they're shifting all the time, and we have to be aware of that. We can't get caught back up in the process of, or just get caught back up in whatever is being projected out to us. It's so sophisticated, and to think that we have to be smarter. We really do. We have to be smarter than and stay, many steps ahead in order to not get caught back into the process of the duality, right? The dualistic nature. So, they're going to prop one side up and then the other, and it's all run by the same side. So, not to say that there aren't things that we need to be addressing, but it's going to come from our inner work, how we address that most successfully. So this is we really do need to draw our power from this process. And Uriel is the archangel of it's the fire of God. It's the archangel that is associated with Antares, fixed star Antares, which is where Juno is, and K2 right now, fixed star Antares, the south node, and now a direct Juno, asteroid Juno. So we really do. This is such a reminder. It's really drawing our attention. And when you see the degree that Saturn has transited into today, because it has moved degrees, you're going to see why this is so important, because it's just going to make it even more solidified and a lot harder if we don't commit completely to this process. Now, where our attention goes, though, through all of these things, here is our Five of Forces. Now, I showed it to you in its reversed position to show you up close the winter, right? And you do see that there's a church and a steeple in the background here, but everything else is stripped down to its very basic essence, and it is absolutely a yin phase in the winter. So our attention goes, and it is expressed out based on all of these factors so far into this time of receptivity, time of going inward, time of taking stock, as the title of the transmission has already communicated. Less active in the world and more active in our inner world, right? There's a quiet energy that pays off later. Now, again, this can go back to this Knight of Discs that is working and working and working, but it's working to cultivate something. It's important that we also really get into the stillness and the receptivity, which is where Saturn had been, and it will be up until later today when it shifts into the next degree in its retrograde. So interactivity is mixed with a peaceful retreat right now, and this is really where we can express this energy through our conscious awareness and attention, through our actions, through our thoughts. But it really stems from this very deep inner work to go deeper and deeper. And this is something I talked about in my post about the attunement for day 3, which is every time you go into this space, this is why you need multiple treatments, especially for holistic type of healing. Every time you address a layer, a new one is revealed to you. And so this is what we're doing, is going into this space more and more. And so it may seem like nothing's happening. But part of our challenge right now in the heart here is to accept that and to be less active outside of us, and to gather in and be willing to, receive, right? It's important that we receive. And you're going to see here is our Archangel Raphael again at the top of this reading here. So what to reasonably expect? Well, this is interesting. So the Hierophant, there is Sun in Sagittarius, number 1, as a symbol for the teacher of the inner values, speaking of inner life. Also Jupiter in Pisces. This is, that was so lovely when Jupiter was in Pisces. It's a little bit harder now. Jupiter is now laser focused with Aquarius. That lightning bolt now is being directed and utilized. And so when Jupiter comes back into Pisces, it's going to be so lovely. I think it's going to be such a beautiful moment. You could really feel, and many people experience this, when it first came into Pisces, everybody was like, yeah. So what is happening in your life, in your chart or whatever, you could feel that expansion of good fortune in that area. And then as it went retrograde, it pulled right back in. And it's just like, I'm just showing you what's possible here, because there's still more work to be done. So with the Hierophant, ultimately it represents number 5. It is the Taurus. It relates to the Taurus in the zodiac, right? So you see here multiple things going on. We've talked about this before, right? So masks, also that he is on either side, flanked by by a bull, right? The sign of the Hierophant. Whoops. And the three circles, you see that there is this this is the same figure in the Eon at the very end of the deck, right? But this time this character is holding a light, right? Holding a light that's shining. And this person, and there's masks everywhere. You can see a little clover back here. I'm not even sure what these are necessarily coming out, but there's the moon, right? She's got this like bow that's actually a crescent moon. Okay, so when we get the Hierophant, there is a structure here, of course, but it's really this is the high priest, and the high priest, or the Buddha, right? The Buddha, Siddhartha, right, was considered a Taurus. So the search for hidden truth, right? It is being able to search and gain illumination from our own process of searching, right? It provides some sort of instruction, and it provides some sort of structure, like an authority, right? The teacher in some ways, but the priest, the high priest, is someone that has direct connection and communion with the natural flow, and is able to illuminate these hidden truths based on this natural connection. And so when it's reversed, it could be a lot of different things. Ultimately, I think it's going to be, it really is, it's much more, again, drawing our attention to the need for this dynamic within us to address it. And this is a likely impact and effect based on everything else, that we are going to come into this system of inner truths, but we'll be our own teacher, receiving the teaching, right? And so sometimes when it's reversed in a really dramatic way, because, Crowley was an incredibly dramatic person. We should look at his chart. Oh, wow. That's a great idea for like a teaching thing. I'm gonna put a pin in that one. So bigotry, blind faith in dogma, intolerance toward anything else that's not ours, right? It also can be gullibility and running to any new belief just because the traditional one is considered boring. Keep an eye on that. That is the flipping of the script. And it does get flipped. I mean, the hangman is literally flipping the script in the neutralization of Uranus, but we have to be careful. We have to be very careful that we don't get pulled into the bait and switch, because that's definitely something that is coming through very strongly right now. Intolerance or whatever. But the way we can utilize this to our highest potential right now is to know that we're going to receive these teachings, that we can be open to it, that we can and our awareness is really drawn on how important it is. And also too, that it's not fully, it's not fully expressed yet. We haven't gotten the full picture, but we're starting to. We're definitely starting to. And it's part of it is because we collectively are still kind of resisting this deep inner work, like really doing this deep work. Even people that don't, even people who I would say are in spirit and are in spirit don't agree with certain things that are kind of being foisted upon us collectively. When it comes down to speaking or acting on it, they're still going to struggle, right? These is putting their hand in the sand, but not actually digging the sand and getting to the root of things. So things aren't going to be totally shown to us. And there's a lot of different ways that this is going to unfold itself, but the highest potential here is for us to receive the teachings, to receive the hidden truths as a result of our searching, doing the inner search within us. I think this is really the strongest way we can align with this. Okay, so when it comes to the guidance, we have the Akashic Library, right? So right away, we know that this is a new initiation. It's time to go down into the library. It's time to do this search on ourselves, right? The Sphinx, according to Edgar Cayce, under the Sphinx is where the Akashic records are. So either literal or metaphorical, it really doesn't matter. It's the idea that underneath this is the real history of our history. So the Akashic Library is going down into this area and doing the research, right? Getting into our own record and rewriting it. That's the other thing. So there is a better understanding of our motives and old motives, but new purposes. There is the opportunity to write. These karmic contracts are over, right? We have to finish them out. If we are going to move into this awakening, if we're going to be awakening in a material body, these old contracts are needing to be shored up. And now that Juno is now direct, that is her territory. And it's really, I'll wait till we get to the astrology, because there's certain things that I need to address about these feminine attributes that are connected to the asteroids and the goddesses and Black Moon Lilith and Algol, right? Because that's where Black Moon Lilith is today, is in conjunction with fixed star Algol, which is the Gorgon, right? The head of Medusa. So we'll get there. This is just signaling to us that it's time to go into, we have a new initiation. It's time to go into our Akash, to understand ourselves, where we come from, where we're going, and also to start writing a new volume, right? That's part of what we're doing here. We're in territory that humanity has never been in before. And if it has, it didn't get past this point, right? And so we're in a position now where we're writing new volumes of our Akash, and it's really exciting, but it's not easy work, especially when we're kind of resisting it, which is what I feel like is happening. And the camel just suggests that, again, look to your inner resources. Accumulation of all of these experiences that have been challenging gives us the courage to move forward, because we've done it already. It's like muscle memory, but in an energetic and spiritual way. And also the camel is storing everything that it needs in its own body. So again, go back to your inner resources. Allow the four winds to lift up your concerns, whatever they are, and the sun to burn them away. The sun can burn them away, right? And assuredly, that is going to be happening when there's already sunspots. There's 3 coronal holes right now, or there's three holes in the magnetic field of the sun. And so, depending on which way they're facing and what's going on, rest assured, in the next couple of days, we're going to get more solar weather. And it's not going to be comfortable. It may not be as intense as other ones. We're just going to have to find out what happens. But this is when we give up our concerns and let the sun burn them away. Let the light come in and infuse our DNA with new information and new codes, right? This is how we upgrade. Oh boy, but know that you have everything in you to do this, right? The the beauty and the miracle of life in general is that it is self-healing and self-regulating, given the right tools, given the right resources, and we have them within us, right? Nothing outside of us is going to do any better than what we have capable within of us. Now, when it comes to our conscious attention and awareness, of course, here's our gorilla again. Take the time to listen compassionately to those you love, right? Venus is in a very precarious position. We'll discuss that in a minute. But this is talking about how people are always changing and evolving over time. And so we can't, why stay in these fixed positions when we can actually nurture our relationships and accept where people are on their own journey, and they're walking their own path, and we don't need to be judged. We've talked about this, judgment versus discernment. Listening is just as important as speaking, right? It's an equal part of communication. And if you really want to practice unconditional love and compassion, that means you really actually listen to people, especially people you care about, and maybe things have been stressful. Maybe there is a rift between you. You need to nurture the relation, even if it's great. You don't want to take people for granted. You want to nurture the relationships that you have that are valuable to you. And also too, here's Archangel Raphael, again, coming in with blessings, with miracles, with healing, with that heart chakra healing, right? And so we can offer, when we listen, like really listen compassionately and just hold space for people, right? Acknowledging who they are and what their challenges are without trying to fix it. We actually do open up space for this to come in, this Archangel Raphael space, the healing of the heart chakra, right? The offering of the healing energy from an open heart. This is the Pleiadian revival that's coming, right? When the nodal axis shifts, this is going to be the trajectory of our soul's growth, is in the direction of the Pleiades, right? And the Pleiadian star seeds, they are in the Pleiadians. I mean, I would not even be remotely surprised if disclosure and first contact come during that time. We'll see. I mean, who knows? It doesn't really matter. What matters is our own spiritual work right now, and everything else is just a bonus, honestly. Or it's a challenge that supports the process along the way. So beautiful reading. The last couple days have been beautiful readings, and maybe that's just a reflection of my own commitment to my process, but I do feel like that we have collectively turned a corner, like I said yesterday, and we are being brought into a place where we can go inward and do this work, and we're supported by the grid work of the planet, because she's done this already. So she's like, I've already done this. Here, plug into me, and I'll give you the resources that you need in order to manage this situation, right? We're not doing this alone. And Archangel Raphael is a pretty good indication that we are not doing this alone, and that we only need to ask if we want assistance. So we're going to bring in the chart for now. I'm going to check in with the stream and see what's going on here. Good morning, Harmony Knitting. I love your handle, by the way. That's really cool. I was a crocheter myself. I never got into knitting necessarily. I don't think there's anything good or bad about either of those. It just happened to be the aspect that I practice the most. So, I see here. Let's do this. Yeah, and then I can do this a little bit. Yay. And then stay out of the way of my own icon on my video. Okay. Well, at least on YouTube. So, all right, friends, here is our chart for today. It is the 4th of August. We're going to look at our current transits. We'll probably take a little detour back in time as well, as we look at the transits that were relevant while we were sleeping, maybe as we were getting up, maybe as we were going to bed. It just depends on what our schedules are in this current lifetime. But what we do see here is that the moon in Gemini had a mutable square with our friend Neptune, which is retrograde in Pisces, okay? So this mutable square that we're looking at right here, this square moment is... as the moon has been moving through Gemini, like I said, there's so many ideas, so much percolation, so much feeling of potential concepts, really not making necessarily a decision about anything, but just really giving ourselves the opportunity to explore and to now exteriorize that process. The thing with the square here with Neptune, especially retrograde in Pisces, it is, giving us all of the resources to really substantiate something, either our own conscious ideal or something that's unconscious that we are not addressing. And I think that Neptune in Pisces in this moment, and has been for a minute now, has been really challenging this conscious versus unconscious aspect, because regardless if you're conscious of it or unconscious, it's being substantiated. That is the aspect of Neptune, and Neptune as self-sacrifice, right? So we are giving of ourselves, but what are we giving ourselves to? Are we giving ourselves to our own conscious, ideals being brought into form, or are we giving away our unconscious desires, it being manipulated and taken in some ways, right? It's being harnessed. It's being harvested for somebody else's agenda. That's also a possibility here. The thing about the retrograde is that it's making it really obvious to us, right? There's no more, the fog is not necessarily as thick as it once was when it was moving direct. And so the moon in Gemini, though, as we're getting later and later into Gemini, and you're going to see this quincunx that comes right after with Pluto, we're just now like going back over this moment here. And remember, this location was really important in May, right? With Mercury retrograde and that whole lunar cycle as well. In late Gemini was really, and the sun too, of course, was really relevant. Especially with eclipses as well going on. It was very relevant this late. So we're coming back and like having another round of interfacing on an emotional and a feeling-based level, on a subconscious level, with this integration process in our minds that Gemini represents, right? And so it's like, on one hand, these spiritually creative processes are growing, and we're integrating a lot of concepts, in the moon's transit, that lunar transit that allows us to adapt at any given time to this type of energy, what it represents. And so we're adapting to our reality through the growth of spiritually creative processes. There's our Knight of Discs in some ways, right? But also too, just the work that we are doing, right? Integrating things, bringing them together, creating something, but we need some measure of this or that in order to integrate in general. The square to Neptune is really Neptune in Pisces is nothing is a match for it. It dissolves everything it touches. It pulls everything into the soup of the Akash, right? We talked about. And so, we are trying to keep our minds up in this high place and integrate these ideas. And this is how we're adapting to reality in this moment. But the square, right? That friction with Neptune is just like, this is way more about substantiating the essence of who we are in connection to everything else, as opposed to this momentary adaptation to reality by keeping our high ideas up here. Not so, it's not, oops, let me put sorry guys. You always think I would plug in my laptop when I'm doing this, and I never do. Okay, here we go. Good to go. So that was the square. It comes along right after that with this quincunx to Pluto retrograde, of course, and Pluto being Pluto is just doing all of the work now to pull away all of these layers to show us the deeper channels running underneath. It's just so deep under our subconscious into the collective unconscious in some ways, and the destructive elements that set the stage for transformation. This quincunx here, because this degree of the moon looks just like that Five of Forces card reversed, the winter, everything's stripped down, and the trees are covered with frost, but there's nothing else, and it's just this essential archetypal essence. And the quincunx here is that we have to like full on engage with all of the feelings, the depth of it with Pluto, whereas our adaptation, the way that we adapt to reality in that moment, is to strip everything down to its very basic constituent parts, right? Archetypalization, essential nature that is part of going within and recognizing. So these are not things that are, there's no friction here. It's just they don't fit together. And so we will have to adjust ourselves, or something will come in and adjust it for us. And this has already happened as of 7:17 this morning, Eastern Standard Time. So we are, still working with this adjustment energy at that moment, but it has passed by. So again, it's like, we do realize, and we're really expressing ourselves and allowing our conscious awareness to flow through this idea of like not even breaking, just stripping everything down to its constituent parts of this and that, right? To see them and understand them, and to get into that contractive yin phase. And again, Pluto in the retrograde of Pluto is just making it very difficult to keep that quiet, essential nature of, the landscape covered in snow, in our own field, right? In our own emotional landscape. It's just difficult, and it doesn't fit with where Pluto is, which is really like the depth of the feeling. So, and the destruction that it causes. So we just need to adjust ourselves here, because these are intense energies coming in. And this is why I say the Hierophant being reversed, it could go so many ways. And it really depends in a lot of ways how we adjusted ourselves in this moment, right? Because that's usually when there's a wild card thrown in to really help with this process. Usually. Sometimes we have to initiate that wild card ourselves, right? So from here, the moon comes into a square with Pallas Athena right after, in Pisces as well. So that same mutable square energy, where we are, where, we want to start emerging in some ways and interfacing, right? With a more mind-structured reality, like the gypsy is emerging from her camp and is like going into the city, right? That's a struggle, but it's a necessary part of the integration process. And again, the square with Pallas Athena in late Pisces retrograde, making it so much more obvious that we need to reestablish a strategy here, to know that everything, that everything is accumulated that we can use, right? And we have to go back over this and be like, is this everything we can accumulate? Oh, that's interesting. Because, and again, the square with the moon, that friction there is just like the tendency and the feeling is to want to reach out, right? To reach out to the other side of the aisle, and to emerge from our little cocoon here. And this square is going to, and has, I would say, because this was this morning, this square has, given us pause in some ways about how we can do this, or if we should do this, or how this fits into our, redeveloping a strategy for ourselves in terms of what are we accumulating in terms of karma? What are we, there it is. What are we accumulating in terms of karma? I think there's some more work we have to do in terms of our own process before we can really understand that. And we have to be very mindful not to accumulate more karma without at least acknowledging re-strategizing with what has accumulated so far. Again, this is where the Hanged Man comes into effect and is really useful. So then the moon comes into a trine. This is all happening. Now we're coming into the present moment here. The moon is going to meet Jupiter retrograde in a trine, an air trine at the last, 29 degrees of Aquarius and Gemini. So this is a moment here where we get to recognize that the best and brightest of all of the potentials, right? the setting of social standards through our own personal excellence, right? Where the moon is. We have all of the options, the best and the brightest laid out before us in terms of ideas and concepts and, ideas, concepts, thoughts, the way we communicate, all of those Gemini things, all of the ideas, the best and brightest are presented for us, through us, to us, as a result of each of our own development of personal excellence and the competition, right? There's that Orion starseed nature. The competition is what motivated each of us to get better, to achieve personal excellence. And then it sets the standard, right? It sets the tone. And when we really align with that, each on a personal level, it is absolutely structurally sound and finding a lot of support with Jupiter retrograde, that as much as Jupiter wants to expand, Jupiter also harnesses the lightning bolt and the neutralizing factor. And so the neutralizing factor within us, that is really the energy that pervades all existence, all, moves through the collective. It just feels like this mycelial type of, this mycelial type of lattice structure, right? This grid work that is the Pisces field, and Aquarius represents the power that goes through it. When we have in front of us all of the best and brightest in terms of ideas, it's getting a lot of traction with where Jupiter is, which is really providing a lot of benefit and good fortune and expansion and even some bombacity when it comes to the conscious totality of our being in relation to the collective, right? The last degree of Aquarius is really, and Jupiter is harnessing that lightning bolt, and it's making contact, but it's within us, right? Jupiter is retrograde right now. So the moon then comes into Cancer right after this in her home territory. And this is where things get really deep today, right? The moon in Cancer allows us to really deepen that intuitive channel, that psychic channel, that connection with the core of who we are, allows us to emotionally stabilize ourselves. The moon comes into Cancer, and from there, this is when the sun is in a trine to Chiron. So this is kind of like the pinnacle of the day in terms of the transits. The sun in a trine to Chiron, the sun in Leo, 13 degrees Leo. This is the retired sea captain in his rocking chair, right? The oscillation, the quiet oscillation. Ooh, that feels good. The quiet oscillation, recollecting of what I've been through in terms of the joys, what I've been through in terms of the crises, going back and forth in this, in this oscillation of quiet recollection of where we've been before. There's that camel again, right? The camel that is like, you have everything you need within you, and you can actually activate it through your own rhythm in terms of remembering and recalling what has happened. This trine to Chiron that is retrograde now is allowing us to really step out of that. The oscillation doesn't have to be a ping pong effect of back and forth with, with the duality and the division nature, and even our own need for control and savior mode, all of the victim savior aspects of Chiron. This trine is really an opportunity by the end of today to elevate ourselves out of the experience of the frustration. Well, maybe not necessarily elevate out of it, but be able to recall that we've been here before. We've been here before and what we've done before. And so when it connects to this much more primal and much more subjective experience of potency to like get somewhere right away, we can take ourselves out of it and be like, oh yes, we've done this before. I've done this before. We've gone through back and forth, and I have everything within me in order to move through this process. And it's going to be really highlighted and illuminated with this trine to Chiron by the end of today. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And with the moon coming into Cancer, this is a great time to acknowledge and really deepen that core of who we are, to stabilize ourselves and that will, in fact, be what stabilizes us as we go deeper into who we are, to do that inner work, to be receptive. And the planet herself is absolutely helping this process. Now, speaking of the planet and this concept of the planet herself. Now, I want to point out that Lilith, again, right, as I had said before, Black Moon Lilith is in, let me show you here. Yes, Black Moon Lilith is in conjunction with Algol, right? 26 to 27 degrees Taurus, all right? This is important. Now, the tendency here is to also vacillate very wildly with the dark feminine, right? If the dark feminine of Black Moon Lilith is not acknowledged, then we are our self-preservation and this really strong drive to be empowered, to be the protector in some ways of the earth, to have that deep connection within each of us that is primal and preserving. When we are unaware of how it will lead us, if we're unaware of this aspect of ourselves and we try to suppress it out of shame and guilt, then we are not actually fully aligned and integrated with our shadow, right? It is kind of running the show in some ways. And this is how this aspect of Lilith in particular is inappropriately, I guess, or darkly expressed when we are unaware of it, and or with that hijacked idea of shadow work, where we acknowledge our shadow and think that bolstering it is doing our shadow work, when really what we're doing is just operating out of our shadow. It's not, it's about the integration that is important. So with Black Moon Lilith here at Algol, like this, at the head of the Gorgon that is released, right? That toxicity that becomes a monster when we are not acknowledging our trauma or we haven't dealt with it. In conjunction with Black Moon Lilith today, this is a really strong potential. We can release this toxicity without letting go of that strong feminine, the rise of the feminine, that strong feminine urge to preserve, right? To defend, to be empowered at the core of who we are, our connection to the planet. We can, as long as we know what we're releasing it to. It's when we're unconscious of all of these things. And this goes right back to Neptune, where it is. If we are unconscious, then it's just desire. It's just hunger. It's desire. It's desire for power, self-preservation, all of those Draco aspects that are illuminated because we are not doing the inner work to integrate that. So there's a real potential today. And again, that's why I say with the Hierophant being reversed, there is a real potential, absolutely, there is a real potential of us, like, certain people just being like, I'm just going to attach to whatever makes sense now, what you're telling me, or I am going to, really have an intolerance to anything that doesn't fit into this paradigm at all. And I am just going to continue to feed this part of myself. So if we are able to let it go and let it pass as a, naturally releasing that part of ourself in order to give it up to the greater good, right? Because that's what happened with Medusa, right? The head of the Gorgon was able to neutralize some other bigger issues like the Kraken, for instance. There's a lot of power. There's so much power it's so potent, right? And within us. And so it's important that we are aware of it as we embark in this place. It's really important to be aware of this, okay? So let's see if there's anything else here that's part of this transmission. I don't think so. I think I'm going to just leave it there for today because that's a lot to work with. Oh, Saturn. This is how I'm going to, we need to talk about Saturn. Because Saturn will move in as of tonight when this trine, look at this, when this trine is coming into exact, this is when Saturn moves into the next degree in its retrograde. And this is a difficult degree. This is such a hard degree that I need to just read you the Sabian symbol, okay? Because it's going to give you some insight into what we are coming up against. Because as we know with Saturn, there's no way around Saturn. There's no way around it. And this is within us. So it's obvious. It's something that we can't look away from. It's something that we can't bypass within us, and is providing us a form and a structure in order to experience this. A man who had for a time become the embodiment of a popular ideal is made to realize that as a person, he is not this ideal. Oh, this is person versus archetype, right? We put people on a pedestal and they represent something versus the real actual person. And we need to deal with real actual people if we're ever going to be a healthy collective. And so we need to see people as people rather than as screens upon which we project our ideals or our unconscious desires. Ooh. We have to be very aware of this. Now, we're going to be dealing with this energy for a number of weeks because this is Saturn, so it doesn't move that quickly. So we're going to be in this degree for a while. This is going to be a lot of this stuff becoming very palpable within us, right? And so when Saturn stations direct later, and comes back over this point again, it's going to be expressed outside of us. It's going to be very obvious outside of us. Right now, we have no choice but to deal with this. And this is so much more easily managed if we accept where we are and do the inner work. Start going deeper within. Even if you think you have it all figured out, there's no end to the possibilities here. And so we have to give ourselves the opportunity to see ourselves as who we really are, and realize that we are not the ideal that we may have set ourselves up for, that there is an ideal in someone else that we have to be realistic about, because we've put way too much emphasis on them being some sort of influencer or leader, and then we find out who they really are, and then projecting onto other people. That's a big one, right? We do this all the time, and this is where judgment comes from. And if you want to be discerning and not judgmental, this is going to be a really important position for you. So knowing where Saturn is right now in your chart and where it's aspecting is really important. So for me, Saturn is not only in my first house, it is conjunct with is exactly conjunct with my asteroid Juno in the first house, and is directly opposite my natal Jupiter, which is my ruling planet in Leo. My natal Jupiter is in Leo, right? And so this is, boy, oh boy, there's going to be some hard truths coming out for me, I would imagine, as we embark on this. And Jupiter being my ruling planet, being in my 7th house, like all of that really large, expansive, beneficial, fortunate energy, the way that I'm, this energy, I'm just giving you kind of an example here, how you can read this in your own chart. You have Jupiter, that represents not only that expansive energy and management and leadership, it also is a big part of my expressed personality with a sun in Sagittarius and a stellium in Sagittarius. And this is this is going to be an interesting transit, to say the least, for me, and coming to terms with who I am actually, as opposed to, and it goes both ways, right? And not being a screen for someone else to project their ideals onto either. So when you understand your chart and you understand some of these really tense aspects that are starting to come into play, then you can see, oh, these are the themes that I'm likely going to be addressing in my own life and in my spiritual journey in this time frame. So anyway, that's one way to look at this. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. We'll be together for the daily tomorrow. Let me know if you need anything. My email's in the description box below. You can book a reading or energy work or healing attunement through the link to my website in the description box below as well. And I'm here to serve. And so this is why these transmissions are just an offering every day, because I receive them as well. And so I want to share them with you, and we're all in this together, aren't we? So I love you guys. Like I said, truly appreciate you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye.